Revealed, the incredible, divine appearances of angels in the Bible's 7 transforming encounters. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, in the land of Canaan, turmoil and strife lingered in the hearts of those who sought the promise of God. Among them was Hagar, the Egyptian maidservant of Sarai, wife of Abram. In a moment of desperation wrought by years of barrenness, Sarai had devised a plan that would lead Hagar to bear a child born from the complicated web of human decisions tangled with divine promises. This child, whose very existence spoke to a lack of faith, weighed heavily on Hagar's heart as she found herself fleeing from the tents that had become a prison of her own making. As Hagar traversed the harsh wilderness, the harsh rays of the sun beat down mercilessly upon her. Each footfall echoed the agony of her isolation, compounded by the sting of betrayal. Sarai's jealousy had turned her once familiar home into a place of scorn and rejection, and the child within her, a reminder of that pain. Her heart fluttered like a frightened bird as she pressed on, her thoughts swirling with fear for both herself and the life she carried. Then, from behind the glare of the sun, a figure emerged, a radiant being, the angel of the Lord. He appeared not as a warrior, but as a messenger of deep compassion. Hagar, startled, stopped in her tracks, her heart racing at this celestial interruption. The angel's voice, a gentle balm, called to her, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" Taken aback by his knowledge, she replied, "I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai." The bitterness in her voice conveyed the depth of her unresolved pain. The angel listened with divine attentiveness, prompting her with the weight of revelation, "Return to your mistress and submit to her. I will surely multiply your offspring, so that they cannot be numbered for multitude." His promise pierced her despair, illuminating her future with hope. Before she could respond, the angel named her son, declaring, "You shall call his name Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction." A familiar warmth washed over Hagar, for in her moment of anguish, she sensed the divine awareness of her struggles. This was a promise that transcended her circumstances, a legacy stretching far beyond her own life. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select All Notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. In that sacred moment, Hagar's heart began to shift. The words of the angel resonated like a melody of hope amidst her sorrowful thoughts. She recognized that her existence was woven into God's greater tapestry. "You are a God of seeing," Hagar spoke aloud, realizing that even in her darkest hour, she was not forgotten. With tears mingling with dust upon her cheeks, she began her journey back to the tents, no longer simply a servant, but a woman chosen to carry a promise. As she walked towards her past, uncertainty haunted her. Would Sarai accept her? Would she be seen not as a symbol of betrayal but as one touched by God's own hand? Hagar, emboldened by the divine encounter, envisioned a future that would honor the legacy of Ishmael. Yet, she tread with caution, knowing that even in God's plans, human hearts could often clash. Would they embrace the promise God had extended to her? Only time would reveal the unfolding of truth woven within his divine plan. As Hagar approached the tents of Abram, her heart raced with a tumult of emotions. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that mirrored her doubts and fears. Would Sarai receive her with open arms, or would the bitterness of the past still fester between them? With each step, Hagar whispered a silent prayer for courage, the promise of the angel lingering in her heart. Upon reaching the camp, she saw Abram standing at the entrance, his gaze drawn to the horizon. The man who had once promised her a place of significance in his household now seemed a distant figure, and she hesitated. But then, at the call of the angel, she pressed forward. The soft rustle of her footfalls mingled with the sound of livestock stirring nearby. "Abram," she said, her voice carrying a tremor that revealed her inner turmoil. The patriarch turned, his eyes wide with surprise, for he had not expected Hagar to return. A moment of silence enveloped them, heavy with the weight of all that had transpired. Hagar, he greeted her tentatively, sensing the gravity of the moment. Why have you come back? With the courage found in her encounter with the divine, she spoke boldly yet humbly, I have encountered the angel of the Lord, who spoke to me in the wilderness. He commanded me to return and submit to Sarai, for he has heard my affliction and promised that I would bear a son. Abram's expression softened at her words as he realized the significance of her return. This child, Ishmael, was more than the product of human strife, he was part of the divine plan foretold by the angel. Then let it be so, he said. You are welcomed among us once more. Just then, Sarai emerged from the tent, her eyes narrowing as she saw Hagar. The tension crackled in the air, and Hagar felt the old wounds begin to throb anew. Yet, she held tight to the promise of the angel and braced herself for whatever reception was to come. Sarai, Hagar spoke, her voice steady, I return as the servants of God assist me in fulfilling his promise. I will bear Ishmael, and in him lies the Lord's watchful care. Sarai's expression was inscrutable at first. Emotions waged war within her heart. Jealousy battled against an understanding of divine sovereignty. What you say is true, she replied, her voice softer than before, but the path ahead may still be fraught with challenges. Hagar nodded, accepting the reality of their complicated relationship. Yet her spirit lifted, for she now knew she was not merely a pawn in the game of human emotion, but a significant part of God's eternal narrative. Days turned into weeks, and the household adjusted to Hagar's return. In her mind, she could hear the echo of the angel's message, affirming that she was not forsaken. Ishmael grew within her, a constant reminder of hope. As Hagar looked upon the promise knitting itself into her very being, she sensed that there was more yet to unfold in the tapestry of God's covenant. As the months passed, a new reality emerged, filled with both joy and tension. Sarai, determined to fulfill her own desires, took further steps that would lead to a pivotal moment in God's plan. Would Hagar's journey of faith and obedience lead to the fulfillment of all the promises whispered by the angel? What was God preparing, hidden beneath the surface of their relationships and conflicts? In time, the full revelation of God's purpose would break forth, but for now, uncertainty shrouded the horizon, leaving those in the household teetering between past grievances and the divine tapestry yet to be woven. In the days that followed, the name of Ishmael lingered in the air, a sacred whisper of promise that breathed life into Hagar's weary soul. As her belly swelled, so too did the anticipation of the household, a confluence of hope and unspoken tension. The nights were filled with dreams, both haunting and prophetic, and the days were burdened with the weight of what was to come. Sarai, restless in her desires, sought counsel from her heart. The memory of her own barrenness gnawed at her spirit like a relentless vulture. One evening, she steeled herself, her eyes fixed on Hagar, who was woven into the fabric of Abram's life, and she approached the woman with greater earnestness. Hagar, Sarai began, her voice carrying both authority and trepidation, you bear the child of promise, and yet, I do not know how to reconcile my heart's longing for a son of my own. Hagar, sensing the swell of vulnerability behind Sarai's words, offered a soft reply, I understand the weight of longing, Sarai. The Lord has met me in my affliction. His promises speak of hope. As they exchanged glances, a flicker of understanding passed between them, an unbroken chain linking their destinies under the watchful eye of the Almighty. But darkness was not far behind, for within the tent, a rivalry began to take root, unconfessed yet palpable. Hagar's presence thrived as Sarai's envy simmered. And as the days turned to months, the strain grew almost unbearable. Hagar found herself often retreating to the hills that overlooked the plains, drawing solace in the shadows of God's creation. One lonely afternoon, as the sun began its descent past the horizon, Hagar sat in the quietude, feeling the flutter of life within. Listen. The Lord's words echoed through her mind, I will multiply your offspring exceedingly. In that moment, a form appeared before her, a messenger cloaked in the light of heaven, glimmering like the first intimations of dawn. Hagar, servant of Sarai, the angel spoke with clarity that pierced through her very being. Fear not, for I have come to remind you of the promises of God. Ishmael is destined to be a great nation, for the Lord has heard your cries. He will grow and dwell in the presence of all his brethren. With reverence, Hagar fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the assurance of divine purpose. "You are the God who sees," she cried, and in that moment, she named the place Bir-lahai-roi, meaning, the well of the living one who sees me, for she had experienced the gaze of heaven upon her. As she returned to the camp, her heart was stirred anew with the promise of God's plan, but unbeknownst to her, Sarai's heart was hardened. The tension within the household bubbled over when Sarai, unable to channel her bitterness, lashed out with vehemence. "Abram," she cried, her voice a crescendo of anguish, "this servant of mine has become proud since you have given her a promise. Cast her out so that peace may return to our house." Abram's heart wavered, caught between the love for his wife and the compassion for Hagar. "Behold," he said with deliberation, "the matter is grievous in my sight. For your sake, do with her as it pleases you." Sarai's determination hardened, and soon Hagar found herself once again at the precipice of despair, driven out to face the wilderness. But it was here, in the desolation, that she would find not only the presence of the Lord, but the promise of an unfathomable legacy that would echo through generations. Yet lingered the question in the shadows of her heart: would her son's life be fraught with the very conflicts and struggles of the very household she longed to belong to? As Hagar wandered deeper into the wilderness, the winds carried whispers of the Lord's eternal plan, leaving a flicker of hope against the storm of uncertainty, for God was weaving together threads of destiny, unseen yet undeniable, preparing to reveal his sovereign purpose through vessels both humble and flawed. What was hidden amid their struggles would soon glitter with the light of divine revelation, as the tapestry of his promise began to unfold. When the time was right, all would witness the fulfillment of God's unbreakable covenant in ways they could scarcely imagine. As Hagar wandered in the wilderness, the weight of despair bore down upon her, and the sun sank low, casting long shadows across the parched earth. Her heart, a vessel of fear and hope alike, wrestled with the promise spoken by the angel. How could Ishmael flourish when she felt the grip of abandonment tighten around her? In her flight from Sarai, she sought refuge by a small fountain, the water glistening like a forgotten promise amidst the harshness of her surroundings. Desperate, Hagar knelt and poured out her soul to the Lord, her cries rising like incense into the heavens. "O Lord, help me. I am but a stranger in this land, and I fear for my child. Hear my voice and my plight." And in that moment of utter despair, the voice of the Lord beckoned to her once more: "Hagar, I see your anguish. You are not alone." The ground beneath her seemed to tremble with his presence, and she felt a renewed strength wash over her like rain upon dry ground. "Return to Abram and Sarai," the Lord commanded, "for I have ordained a movement of my hand through this child. Ishmael will grow into a great nation, for I have chosen him, and he will be the father of many. Fear not the hearts of men, rather trust in the power of the Most High." With these words, hope ignited anew within Hagar's heart. She stood up, her spirit revived, and the world around her seemed to brighten at the promise of God's faithfulness. "I will return, Lord. I will go forth as you have commanded." As she journeyed back toward the camp, the reflection upon her trials lingered, but they felt less daunting in the light of the Lord's reassurance. Little did she know that the echoes of her return would spark a collision of destinies. A family meant to walk under the banner of promise was about to confront the depths of their choices. Meanwhile, Abram sat at the door of his tent, his spirit troubled by the rift that had formed within his household. He sensed the weight of the world upon his shoulders, for both Sarai and Hagar were dear to him, yet each carried a burden that had become increasingly unbearable. Sarai, restless and haunted by jealousy, twisted her fingers in a fabric of worry. As the days turned into weeks, she compelled Abram to confront the shadows gathering around their union. "This cannot stand," she lamented, her voice firm yet lined with desperation. "I cannot bear the sight of her, a reminder of my unfulfilled desire." "What are you to do, Abram?" He gazed into her eyes, reflected in them the tempest of emotions that mirrored his own conflict. "The Lord has made both paths to be known. I will seek his guidance, for it is from him that our fruits shall sprout." As sunset draped its colorful mantle over the horizon, the two were filled with an uneasy silence, the night air bearing witness to their unshed tears. But even now, the Lord's intricate design was unfurling like a tapestry woven with threads both shimmering and dark. On the morrow, Hagar approached the entrance of the tent, her heart pounding like the thunder of impending rain. Sarai, steadfast in her discontent, faced her with a glance sharp as a knife. "You dare to return? Do you not remember your place?" But Hagar stood before her, emboldened by divine instruction. "Sarai, I return in obedience to the Lord. He has spoken to me, and his promise lingers over my son." In that moment, the air was thick with tension, and the fabric of their lives spun tighter with each exchange. Neither woman fully grasped that the echoes of their voices would reach beyond their time, reverberating into the promises of the Lord, igniting destinies entwined in his sovereign plan. In the midst of their strife, the Lord was present, weaving together a narrative of redemption, a reminder that his purposes often play out through the very trials meant to divide. What he had begun in the hearts of these women would soon emerge as a beacon of his unfathomable grace, shining across generations yet to come, calling forth a covenant that is as alive today as it was in the days of old. What awaited them was the profound understanding of a sovereign God, whose plans transcend the turmoil of the human heart. Now the time had come for the house of Abram to brace itself for change, for the plans of the Most High would soon unfurl in unexpected ways. Hagar returned to her place among them, a mix of hope and trepidation filling the air. The promise lingered in her heart, yet the weight of discord still hung like a dark cloud over the household. As Hagar re-entered the tent, Sarai's eyes, smoldering with emotion, darted towards her. "You dare to speak of promises," Sarai scoffed, "yet it is my sorrow that gives you shelter. Will you now taunt me with your obedience to God? Does he not see my anguish as I see yours?" Hagar, feeling the sting of Sarai's words, momentarily silenced her thoughts. But she remembered the grace she had received from the Lord. She gathered her courage and replied, "Sarai, I have not come to bring strife but to honor the word of the Lord. Know that Ishmael is not a reminder of your pain, but a vessel of God's promise." The tension rooted deeper, both women standing on the precipice of a greater divine narrative, unaware of the unfolding mystery that lay ahead. In the stillness of their confrontation, the spirit stirred, and at that moment, Abram approached the two women, sensing an urgency to mediate. "My beloved Sarai, my faithful Hagar," he began, his voice steady like the resolute wind across the plain, "let us seek the Lord together. We are bound by divine covenant, and it is through counsel and love that we shall navigate these troubled waters." Yet Sarai's heart burned with a jealousy that urged her to lash out. "What do you know of my suffering, Abram? You have cast us into this chaos. Is your heart for Hagar, or is it this child who bears her name?" Abram, troubled by the words of his wife, raised a hand for peace. "He who gave us this land and the promise shall also guide us through it, whether we like it or not. I do not deny my affection for you both. We are commanded to love one another, as the Lord has shown us. Let us not be enemies but friends, seeking his face in this matter." As dusk settled, the flicker of the fire cast flickering shadows upon their faces, revealing the inner turmoil as they wrestled with their emotions. Amidst this tumult, a quiet, divine whisper intermingled with the night breeze, "Even now, I am working behind the veil." Hagar pondered the words spoken to her earlier. The Lord had assured her of the future as bright as the dawn, yet darkness loomed. Would Ishmael be nourished in the faith of his father Abraham, or would strife eclipse the promise of nations to come? Days passed, and after the air thickened with silence, the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Fear not, Abram, I am your shield, and your reward shall be very great," he affirmed, a reassurance that stirred in him a longing for greater understanding. "Through Ishmael, I will bless many, and I will establish my covenant with Isaac, the son of promise, whom Sarai will bear." These words illuminated Abram's heart, but clouds of doubt still lingered. As he returned to his tent, he found both women before him, each reflecting a whirlwind of emotions. "Let us stand united in prayer before the Lord," he declared, extending his hands toward them, beckoning them forth to seek God's grace and vision for their futures. As they prayed, a tremor ran through the earth, as if the very stones groaned in anticipation of what was to come. And as they rose from prayer, a glimmer of light pierced through the darkness outside. The sign of the Lord's decree, standing above their strife, a beacon drawing them closer to his sovereign will. What awaited them, they could not yet see. For among them stood the architect of destinies, weaving a story that would ripple throughout history, an ancient promise forged in the fires of trial and covenant loyalty. Would their hearts respond to the new revelations of this divine plan? Only in surrender would they learn the depths of God's grace and faithfulness to his promises yet unfulfilled. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden rays upon the land, an unusual stillness enveloped the house of Abram. He awoke with a deep yearning, aware that the Lord's promise nestled in his heart was both a blessing and a burden. He offered his thanks to the God who had called him by name and set him apart. In that early light, the Lord spoke to him again. Abram, he called, his voice echoing through the chambers of Abram's soul like the distant rumble of thunder before a storm. You must now walk before me and be blameless. This directive stirred a storm within Abram. He had tried to orchestrate the promise through his own understanding, but the path was fraught with conflict. His gaze turned to the untamed horizon, and a weight of accountability settled upon him. Lord, how can I fulfill what you have ordained for me? The Lord continued, I shall establish my covenant between you and your descendants after you, throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring. He laid forth before him a vision of nations that would spring from his lineage, nations born from that very divine promise which he struggled to grasp. Amidst this heavenly encounter, the weight of Sarai's heartache began to press against him again. He turned toward her, who was busy contemplating the morning's chores. Her brow furrowed, revealing the scars of her insecurities. Sarai, he called gently, the Lord has spoken to me yet again. Our journey is projected towards promises beyond our understanding. Sarai approached him, her voice low and trembling, gripped by trepidation. What you desire, Abram, is far too great from what my heart can bear. What assurance do we have of the fruits of this covenant? Will my barrenness haunt us? Do not despise the time of waiting, Abram replied, his reassurance finding the fissures of her doubt. The Lord has a purpose that transcends our timeline. Have faith, our cries reach him in his throne room. In that moment of strife, as darkness loomed around them, the angel of the Lord appeared, radiating divine authority. Fear not, Abram, for I have come to affirm the promise. You shall indeed become a father of many nations, and Sarai will bear you a son. The fruit of your union will be a great multitude. Awe filled Sarai's heart, but the shadows of skepticism lingered. Shall I, being so old, bear a child? She asked in disbelief, laughter mingling with her tears. Her mirth mingled with pain, tinged with the laughter of the world that surrounded them. The angel replied, Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you, and Sarai shall have a son. The firmness of this prophecy resounded like the deafening crescendo of a symphony, ushering forth assurance. Abram fell prostrate upon the ground, overwhelmed by the weight of heaven's decree. As he lay there, he wrestled with the paradox of fear and hope, mixing fervent worship with a plea for understanding. O Lord, how can this be? He whispered, his heart ignited by both wonder and the heaviness of expectation. With a solemn promise, the angel disappeared, leaving the air charged with a lingering sense of purpose. In the silence that ensued, a clarity began to dawn upon Abram's heart, a profound realization that God's sovereignty could weave beauty amidst confusion. Later, as dusk approached, the darkness seemed to yield before the glowing promise of a new dawn. Hagar and Ishmael walked together under the vast sky, unaware of the covenantal blessings upon their lives. Yet unknown to them, the winds had shifted. The Almighty was orchestrating a divine revelation that would echo through generations, embedding itself into the very fabric of humanity. The stage was set for a collision of destinies, awaiting the appointed hour. As Abram fortified the promise in his heart, another revelation began to merge amidst these planning whispers of heaven. What they did not yet grasp, God observed silently, was that even amidst their doubts, my will shall prevail. This divine assurance hung upon the cusp of realization as the shadows faded. The time would soon come for God's promise to break forth, entwining their fate with a tapestry of faith that would forever alter the course of nations yet unborn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the twilight bathed the earth in tones of crimson and indigo. Sarai and Abram gathered their household, feeling the weight of their unfulfilled hope reverberate through the evening air. They sat regarding one another, eyes reflecting unspoken yearning, as shadows deepened around them. In the unsettling quiet, the Lord's voice pierced the solitude once more. Abram, he declared with renewed fervor, I am changing your name. No longer shall your name be Abram, but Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. The new name resonated in the depths of Abraham's spirit, igniting a spark of divine promise that eclipsed his fears. God, a father? He questioned, yet his heart began to believe amidst the uncertainty. How shall I walk worthy of this calling? The Lord continued, You shall be exceedingly fruitful, I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. Every word carried the weight of divine authority, wrapping around him like a mantle of glory. Filled with reverence, Abram fell to the ground again, pondering the implications of this covenant. The promises made were not mere words but an assurance that beckoned him into greater faith. What shall I do, O Lord? How shall I make my heart align with your promise? Take this upon yourself, God instructed. Seek circumcision as a sign of the covenant between me and you. Every male among you shall be circumcised, marking them as children of my promise. Abram's heart raced with this command. Could it be that the mark of obedience would likewise bear the sign of their hope? Lord, even Ishmael? He asked with a tenderness that only a father could bear, fearing for his son born of flesh rather than promise. Indeed, Ishmael will be blessed, the Lord assured him, but my covenant shall be established with Isaac, whom Sarai shall bear to you at this time next year. The weight of this prophecy settled heavily upon Abram as the stark duality of obedience and covenant unfolded before him. Thank you, O Lord, for your kindness, Abram whispered, trembling with the gravity of revelation. The angelic visitations were more than declarations, they birthed transformative vows that linked heaven and earth. As evening deepened, Abram gathered his household, relaying the divine command with fervor. We must honor the Lord's call. We shall bear a mark of covenant unto generations, for he has promised us a future. He encouraged them, igniting a spark of hope amidst the lagging shadows of despair. As members of his household regarded him with a mixture of faith and confusion, Sarai approached, her eyes glistening with new curiosity and daring belief. Am I to bear the future? She pondered aloud, emboldened by the gravity of their journey. In no small measure, doubt fluttered within her, but the seed of promise had been planted. Lord, how strange a thought! Shall you truly grace me with a son? My heart quakes at the thought of bearing the blessings of an everlasting covenant. Abraham, God spoke with gentle authority, is anything too hard for the Lord? The question hung in the air, reverberating through their pressing uncertainties. Abram nodded, drawing Sarai closer, both enveloped in the profound longing for understanding. They exchanged looks of cautious resolve. Could faith alone bridge the chasm of impossibility? As he pondered this revelation in the stillness of night, a palpable tension filled the air, a divine energy that raised the hair on his arms. It was as if the winds carried whispers of the promise, beckoning him to trust, to believe against the odds. Meanwhile, beyond the horizon, the destiny of nations stirred in the unseen. The covenant was taking its roots within a barren womb, and the Lord's intentions were irrevocably intertwined with the lives of all who bore witness to this divine unfolding. With each beat of his heart, Abram could sense the contours of God's plan shifting silently towards fulfillment. What marvels await? He thought in wonder, his spirit buoyed by a mixture of faith and trepidation, even as they prepared to act in simple obedience. The threads of faith and doubt intertwined mercilessly in their hearts. The heaviness of the promise rested like an anchor, firmly nestled within the depths of their souls, waiting for the appointed hour when heaven itself would pour forth its blessing upon them. From the shadows, an unseen presence stirred. Darkness quivered as the divine await a moment to manifest the depths of God's sovereign plan, like stirrings before a storm, awaiting a crack of thunder to unravel the future forged in eternity. And it came to pass that in the twilight's embrace, as stars began to adorn the heavens and the cool air whispered secrets of the night, Abraham arose with renewed purpose. He gathered the men of his household and imparted the words of the Lord, inspiring them to heed the divine command. We shall bear the mark of his covenant, for our God has declared promises that echo through the ages. Thus, the days that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Abraham, filled with zeal, brought forth the sign of the covenant in faithfulness to God's command. He gathered Ishmael, and all the males of his household, and they were circumcised in the flesh, their hearts beating in unity with the promise of the Almighty. Though the weight of obedience tested them, the promise of God loomed on the horizon, where the sun of hope would soon break forth. Sarai watched with a mixture of hope and anxiety, her mind restless with the weight of the impending miracle. She could not help but marvel at the words the Lord had spoken. Could this barren womb be filled with life? As night fell upon the land, the echoes of their obedience intertwined with earnest prayers, rising as sweet incense to heaven. Within those moments, the air thickened, an angelic presence lingered softly around them, palpable and stirring their faith even more deeply. Then, on the third day after the covenant was marked, the Lord spoke again. As Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day, he lifted his eyes and beheld 3 men standing nearby. He ran to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. "My Lord," he uttered, "if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. After that, you may pass on, for you have come to your servant." And they said, "Do as you have said." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarai. "Quick! Prepare 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it, and make cakes." Then he ran to the herd and took a tender and good calf, giving it to a servant who hastened to prepare it. As they dined under the tree, he stood by them, knowing the promise they bore would soon become flesh. The men gazed upon him, and one of them inquired, "Where is Sarai your wife?" He answered, "She is in the tent." Then the Lord spoke, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarai your wife shall have a son." At this, Sarai overheard the words from the entrance of the tent, and she laughed within herself, saying, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" But the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarai laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child, now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you, about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." Fear gripped Sarai as she denied having laughed, but the Lord replied, "No, but you did laugh." In that sacred moment, Abraham understood anew the depth of the Lord's promise, a promise that would weave through the tapestry of generations. Faith, once fragile, began to grow roots of confidence in the heart of both him and Sarai, as the prospect of the impossible became tangible before their eyes. Little did they know that beyond this encounter lay the mercy of the Lord, destined to reach not only them but the very nations yet unborn. In the breath of their laughter hid the seeds of divine purpose, blossoming unto a future far grander than they could ever envision. As the sun dipped once more below the horizon, the wind spoke of destiny on the cusp of revelation. What marvelous wonders awaited in the fulfilling of God's sovereign plan? Would their laughter transform into songs of joy? Only time would reveal the unfolding of his divine promise. And the days turned as they so often do, winding forward much like the river that flowed near the oaks of Mamre. Abraham, though old in years, brimmed with fervent hope, for the promise of God had nestled itself warmly within his heart. As the sun rose upon the mountains, casting glorious hues of gold and crimson, he pondered the marvels yet to unfold. It came to pass that the men departed, their countenance shining with the glory of heaven, and Abraham couldn't help but follow them with his gaze until they were out of sight. With each step they took, he felt the stirring of a divine purpose, intermingled with a sense of reverential awe for the words yet unfulfilled, yet bearing the weight of expectation. Meanwhile, Sarah, her heart a whirlpool of emotions, found herself resting in the tent, wrestling with the laughter that had escaped her lips. Could it be, she wondered aloud, that the Lord would grant me my heart's desire? Yet doubt clung to her, unshakable, though mingled with a burgeoning hope. As the wind sighed softly through the trees, the Lord spoke again to Abraham, saying, "I will not leave you nor forsake you, for I am faithful to my word. Prepare, then, for the testing of your faith shall not endure without purpose." The gravity of this message pressed heavy upon Abraham's spirit, compelling him to seek the countenance of God with a heart set upon communion. Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? The Lord pondered, for the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah cried out with wickedness, needing judgment. Abraham's heart trembled at the thought of the not-so-distant cities, the sun casting long shadows over the land, faces of men twisted in iniquity rising in his mind. Lord, Abraham spoke earnestly, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city, will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And God, in his abundant grace, answered, If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. But Abraham's heart was emboldened by this divine discourse, and he interceded, pressing onward and pleading for the fate of the cities of sin. What if there are 5 less? He asked, his heart feeling a strange mixture of boldness and trepidation, knowing the all-seeing gaze of the Lord rested upon him. Then I will not destroy it for the sake of the 45, the Lord replied tenderly. Thus, the dialogue unfolded, God lowering the number as Abraham continued to plead, each increment compounded with hope and fear. What if there are 30? I will not do it if I find 30 there. Shall I go on? He queried again, each question echoing with a desperate longing for mercy. At last, the Lord, hearing the cries of his faithful servant, acquiesced to the persistence of truth and justice echoed in Abraham's heart. For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. As silence filled the air, Abraham realized the gravity of his intercession. His heart bubbled with both fear and thankfulness, knowing that the fate of the countless could rest upon the presence of few. Little did he know that soon the inevitable would come to pass, and the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah would illuminate a greater truth of God's character, the fierce love intertwined with justice, and so the covenant continued, rich with promise, as hearts prepared for the unfolding wonder of God's plan forged through the fire of faith and purpose. Yet beyond the dialogue lay an even deeper mystery. What would it take for the cities of man to turn from their wickedness? What fate awaited the righteous? In the profound silence of the moment, a sense of urgency pulsed in Abraham's veins. The echoes of God's words reverberated, I am the God of justice, trust my plan, for I weave the tapestry of all creation. Would the call for mercy extend into the city streets? The answer lingered, shrouding Abraham in the wonder of divine sovereignty, setting the stage for a revelation yet to unfold. As the dawn broke over Canaan, a sacred assurance enveloped the household of Abraham. The promise of a son loomed over Sarai like the sun's warmth piercing through the night's chill. In the quietness of the morning, she felt a stirring deep within her heart, a realization that the Lord's promise was not merely a distant hope, but a reality inching closer with each breath. As the days turned to weeks, the hand of God moved visibly, shaping the lives of his chosen ones. Abraham, emboldened by the divine promises spoken to him, became a steward of faith, nurturing the faith that burgeoned in Sarai. Is anything too hard for the Lord? That resonant question whispered throughout their home, urging both to trust the unfolding of God's plan, despite the uncertainty that shadowed their existence. And so it was that on a bright morning, a year from the angel's word, the moment of truth arrived. As Sarai labored under the weight of her years and God's decree, laughter filled the air, not the laughter that comes from disbelief, but the joyous laughter of fulfillment. God has made laughter for me, everyone who hears will laugh with me, she proclaimed, her heart swelling with the blessing of Isaac. In that sacred moment, the tension of the past melted away. Ishmael, once perceived as a rival and source of anguish, became intertwined in the joy of his brother. The household, once fraught with complexity and grief, transformed into a haven of promise fulfilled. Hagar, now a matriarch, embraced the richness of motherhood, her heart attuned to God's vision for her son, a great nation destined to rise. Yet, as the winds of joy billowed through their encampment, the echoes of past struggles lingered. Sarai's spirit, once overshadowed by envy, became a beacon of grace and understanding. Let it be known that the Lord has blessed me, and through this miracle, peace shall reign in our home, she declared, voicing the commitment to nurture both boys together. No longer were they adversaries in a tale of jealousy, they were brothers within a divine lineage. Abram, now Abraham, bore witness to a miraculous tapestry woven by the Lord's untouched hands. The realization that God is faithful to his promises transformed not only his identity but the trajectory of generations to come. It is through faith, he spoke to his sons, that we see miracles unfold. Let your hearts anchor upon the character of our God, who sees all and knows all. As days turned into years, the legacy of Ishmael and Isaac stretched far and wide. Nations were birthed from the promise, layered in the beauty of divine love, a love that transcended misunderstandings and paved the way for reconciliation. Abraham beheld his sons, and in their differences found a testament to God's diverse creation. In their union lies a greater blessing, one that will reflect the fullness of the covenant. And so it was, with every child born under the watchful eye of the Lord, that the story of God's people unfolded. Hagar, Sarah, and Abraham became echoes of faithfulness, wherein generations would trace their lineage back to this intersection of divine purpose. Even the nations formed from Ishmael would come to know the God who sees. As the twilight set across the mountains of Canaan, Abraham gathered his household near. Let us speak of the Lord's goodness, he urged, his voice filled with wisdom gathered across the years. Together, they rejoiced in the story of God, of his promises, his faithfulness, and the fulfillment witnessed in their lives. In the hearts of Abraham's family lay a call to reverberate through time. Each life connected to the covenant rolled out like a scroll marked by his hand, drawing the world toward the great plan set forth in love and redemption. The gathering sparkled with the light of many candles, illuminating the faces of those who believed in the Lord's way. Their laughter rang sweet, a laughter rooted not in skepticism but in joyous perspective born of an enduring hope. As the night enveloped the sky, a gentle hush fell among them, and the shadow of God's presence drew near. Amidst the ambition of their legacies, a whisper of divine purpose unfurled. Fear not, for I am with you, I have chosen you for this work. In this promise, Abraham found solace, knowing he had introduced the world not simply to his sons but to the true and living God whose plans are ever faithful, ever grand. So, beloved friend, as we conclude this sacred chapter, let us remember the central truth woven throughout: God sees, he hears, and his promises will always bear fruit. As our hearts reflect upon the powerful encounters of faith, let them be catalysts to ignite our own journeys. You need to subscribe now to stay connected to God's Word that transforms lives. This is the moment to help spread biblical truth. Click that button. Leave a like now to help share God's Word through the algorithm and spark hope. Comment below your spiritual reflections and share how this story has impacted your faith journey. Don't wait even one more second, share this powerful testimony with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth today. May these actions bring forth a harvest of blessings, reaching souls for Christ.